Hey guys, welcome back to Games of War. Today's episode we're going to take a look at some of the top RPGs on the DS in my opinion. Now this is by no means like a top 5 or a top 10, no particular order, just games that have really stuck with me through the years, and trust me, this is a machine that is littered with a lot of amazing RPGs. So I really wanted to narrow it down to some of the ones that really stuck with me and I still play to this day, because an RPG is like a movie. Every time you go back and do another playthrough, you're going to get something new from the story, and it just put this overall big puzzle piece together. Before we get started, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you who gave me positive comments, supported me on Patreon, and made this process very smooth. I was really uncertain as to whether I should even launch the campaign or talk about it, but you guys have made it the most comfortable, easy process. I was really uncomfortable about talking about that kind of stuff and putting money out there, because I know people get funny when it comes to that, but man, you guys are the best. Thank you so much. And as promised, this right now starts the increased production of videos with this channel moving forward. Top DS RPGs, here we go. I want to start things off with a strategy RPG series that I absolutely fell in love with on the DS. Now this series is right up there with Shining Force and Fire Emblem as some of my favorite strategy RPGs of all time. Luminous Arc. Now these take kind of a different approach than the previous two series. These have more of a focus on religion and the Holy Church and witches. Not religion in an overly preachy manner or offensive to anyone with different beliefs, but that's the basis for the story in this game. And the thing that stands out to me the most about this, aside from the witches, which are... I love the approach to witches in this game. You don't know if they're bad or good because the story is constantly changing, and what makes this story memorable and able to be believable when it changes is the absolutely unparalleled character development in this game. In between missions, you're going to be conversing with different party members and building bonds and forging friendships and strengthening that bond, and you're going to learn more backstory. The character development is just spot on in these games, and as you learn more about your characters in your party, this increased bond, this increased friendship is going to transfer over into the battle system on the battlefield. When you're closer to your allies that you have formed a bond with, you're going to launch into new attacks, learn new attacks, more devastating finishers, more devastating special moves, and it is just very well written, and the development went very smooth in both of these games. This team is a huge fan of this mechanic, and what they were able to do was such a labor of love. It actually continued on to the 3DS in the form of Stella Glow, which was sadly the company's last game. I absolutely love Stella Glow. If you have to go out as a company, that's one way that you want to go out on a high note, and Stella Glow was very well received by a lot of gamers on the 3DS. So if you have played Stella Glow and you enjoyed that one, you owe it to yourself to take a step back in time and check out their previous works, Luminous Arc 1 and 2. It's got the very similar vibe, that character development, that character interaction, rock solid gameplay as we came to expect from Stella Glow if you played it. The strategy RPG, top-down 3/4 view, mechanics are solid, gameplay is solid, hand-drawn graphics, beautiful, music is great. Luminous Arc is a series not to be missed for strategy RPG fans. Now here's a game that kind of came out of nowhere for me personally. I had been checking this game out as it was moving along in development, and I knew that it was done by the team that did Final Fantasy IV, the remake on the DS as well, and that team put together a real masterpiece in Final Fantasy IV, a real technical marvel, pushing the DS to its limits, and this game is no different. They've definitely got the graphics department and graphics engine down pat, because they are really pushing the system. A full polygon world, 3D graphics, and it's just very sharp and very good looking. What this game does is bring something that I really enjoyed in the Book of Prophecy. Now, when I was reading about this, I was kind of scared that it might kind of bog the gameplay down, and it seemed kind of, I don't know, a little bit far-fetched and maybe a little bit over-indulgent in the terms of trying too much on the system, but I was dead wrong. And this takes a storyline that you have all probably heard before, the kind of Noah's Ark, the world is ending, and you've been chosen to kind of gather up the last living things and make a record of them and take them to the new world, all while a backstory's in there too. It's not just that, it's not just the focus, but so you have the Book of Prophecy, you've been selected, and you are tasked with taking the book and kind of smashing it overhead of enemies, items, and as you do, it records the code in this book, and then you're able to manipulate the code on the bottom touchscreen. and it works in really cool ways, I gotta say. You are able to get a fire element early on, and you can take your sword and apply that fire element. You know, take the bottom screen, open your book, insert the fire code into your sword, and now you've got like a fire blade. People that are sick, you're able to kind of scan them and go into their makeup and then pull out the code that's keeping them sick, and take that code out and make them better. And just the way you're able to manipulate items and characters and enemies and, you know, everything else in the world using this book really makes you feel like kind of a little mini god. And the graphics, like I said, top-notch. Music is great. The setting is fantastic. I like the characters. Some of the dungeons can get a little bit, I don't want to say repetitious, but relying on the old mechanics of like switching, flipping switches and things of that nature, which is kind of archaic. If I never switch another switch on in a dungeon to open up a new path, or you know, move a box around, that kind of old archaic gameplay, I wouldn't complain, I promise you guys. But one more mechanic I just have to mention in Avalon Code is you're able to juggle enemies. And when you think juggling, a lot of games have done air juggles before, but in this game you kind of juggle them and they go higher and higher to the point where they're like shooting out of the earth and into the solar system, and you're still juggling them, and they're just, you've got to see it to believe it. It's pretty impressive on the system. And it just kind of, it's a really odd inclusion that just makes it for an awesome time. It's skill keeping these enemies juggled in the air, but watching them just launch higher and higher till eventually they're out in the solar system is just an insane feat. Avalon Code is very different, but yet very enjoyable. Definitely check out for this one if you like action RPGs. Super Robo Tizen OG Saga Endless Frontier. That is a mouthful. And this is a game that was not on my radar at all when it was coming out. I hadn't heard about this game. Next up, we've got an awesome RPG. This is Super Robot Tizen OG Saga Endless Frontier. That title is a mouthful. I never say it right. And this is a game that I knew nothing of. I didn't have it on my radar at all. I was at work one day searching through some review sites, reading some reviews, and a video played, and it was showing the battle system from this game. And it was out that day. Like, it was out, and it was just a trailer showing the game. And I watched it, and I saw this battle unfold in kind of a side view, 2D, almost like a 2D brawler. And just the most insane combos were going on. You were juggling these enemies. Your party members were being called in and continuing this huge combo, keeping these enemies up in the air and launching into this special attack. I was just blown away. I was like, oh my god, you know, what is this? I gotta have it. Went out and picked it up. The launch edition came with a little box that I've got over there with the CD soundtrack, and it just blew me away. I knew nothing of the Super Robo series Tizen. This was my first introduction to it, and I fell in love immediately with Haken Browning, who is like my kind of lead character. Excuse me. He's like a bounty hunter, dark trench coat, and he just says the funniest shit to his party members. You've got this girl, she's like a cyborg or a machine that is your partner, and they kind of joke back and forth about the different party members you'll meet. Girls with special endowments, nothing is off limits. It's totally hilarious. And I gotta say, the actual setting and game world, the Endless Frontier, in this world, kind of like these portals have opened up, and different species and different life forms from all different planets and solar systems are kind of going through these rifts and ending up on the Endless Frontier. And it's more of a story about all these different species and machines and robots and different life forms coexisting on this one planet. And there's all the while a backstory going on in the background that's actually really interesting. I really dug the story in this game. But Haken Browning being a badass bounty hunter, and the battle system, the animation is impeccable. And the developers of this and fans must have liked this battle system enough, because it went on to be featured in Project Cross Zone 1 and 2. Those being strategy RPGs. This being a full-blown RPG, huge world map to explore, no pointing and clicking on the touchscreen to go from map to map. It's a full-featured RPG, and the battle system is just absolutely combo heaven, amazing. And the special moves you can pull off once you charge your meter, it's all timing based. You're able to juggle your enemies, keep this proper timing, swap in your party members, and unleash one huge combo, fill your special meter, and you're rewarded to an epic special move with some close-up, beautiful animation of beautiful women and Haken. It's just an amazing RPG. I fell in love with this. I've finished this game 3 times now, and I still have interest in checking out new elements of the story, and the battle system is just so much fun. Highly recommend this game. Next up, we have Infinite Space, one of my all-time favorite RPGs on the system. I often refer to this as like the Mass Effect of the DS. It's amazing that Platinum Games was able to fit as much content on a small DS cart as they have. And I think this was my second video where I did kind of a mini impressions review of this. Just completely amazing. The game starts off with a really quality animated intro, setting up a storyline, playing as Yuri, who is like a wannabe pilot that dreams of leaving the planet and going exploring space, exploring the stars. However, in your hometown of Ropasek, there's like a quarantine installed where nobody can go out into the sky. The ruler of your city is like an old retired space dog that can't fly anymore, and he's like damned and determined not to let anybody go out into space. And some hijinks ensue, and the plot kicks into full gear pretty quickly on, and you are out in space, and it is just amazing in scope, getting new ships and modifying these ships and kind of playing Tetris to fit your crew quarters, your guns, your different crew cabins, your different upgrades, your different holds, your different, I mean, so many different ship parts to custom assemble your badass ships and fly out into the universe. And the ship to ship battle is pretty intense. I've heard people write it off as like rock, paper, scissors, man. I don't see it, man. The battle system in this is amazing. Take the time to learn it, the intricacies, and you're going to enjoy it as well. Over 100 different characters and crew people to recruit. Man, you're going to be meeting constantly new people as you go to different towns and talk to them. Kind of like a visual novel of sorts, by talking to people, getting different quests, completing these quests, going back and talk to them afterwards, getting them to join your party. This is just an immense RPG, something that you don't see on today's handhelds, man. And I think it's just due to a changing climate to where it's just different. You know, people were putting up big money back then and the budgets were a little bigger, I think. The handheld is such a niche market today, and there's so much competition from cell phones and Androids and app stores and Google stores, and it's just a different climate. But this is a one-of-a-kind RPG in the DS, and it's simply a must-own. This was getting pretty expensive for a while there. I think a reprint happened on this, and prices have come down, so you owe it to yourself to check out this fine RPG from Platinum. Next up, we've got quite possibly one of my favorite handheld RPGs ever made, if not my favorite, Radiant Historia. And I was excited from this from the get-go, and I was very worried at the same time because it was a time-traveling RPG. And anytime we think time-traveling RPG, immediately think of Chrono Trigger or compare it to Chrono Trigger, one of the best RPGs from the 16-bit era, no doubt about it. But Radiant Historia skillfully dodges what could have been a wannabe or a cliche and implements time travel using this book. You are given the White Chronicle early on in this game, and the world is turning to sand, and very many people have tried before to use this chronicle to kind of use history and rewrite time travel and the storylines to success to keep this world from sanding over, but they've failed. And in this game, you are able to use time travel to rewrite certain events. You're going to launch certain attacks with your party members, and if it fails, you can go back and try again. But it's not just as simple as that, because before this happens, you're briefed on this mission, and you put it together from start to finish, and watching it fail, you're just, oh my god, and maybe party members might die, and you really get attached to what's going on and being able to go back and think, you know, I could have done this different, you know, given different options and different choices. It makes it all worthwhile. The battle system is amazing, kind of a chess-like combination system where you're able to push enemies back. And this game has stuck with me long after I finished it. I absolutely love the soundtrack in this. So if you can get the first print run, it's got a selection of songs from the soundtrack. Not a full soundtrack, which is disappointing because one of the most amazing soundtracks in a handheld game. But I cannot praise this game enough. Stock and his party members will stick with you long after you've finished. And there's some twists and turns that really caught me off guard. The story is amazing. Production value through the roof. I cannot praise Radiant Historia enough. This is an amazing handheld RPG that I'm going to miss if handhelds go away, because this is testament that handheld games can be just as engrossing and just as amazing as big boy console RPGs, for sure. Incredible game. Now, in mentioning Chrono Trigger, I kind of feel like I have to bring up Black Sigil, and I don't say that begrudgingly because I do think this is a pretty enjoyable game. I believe it was made by like a Canadian development team that was trying to make a JRPG, even though none of them were Japanese. And it's definitely a love letter to Chrono Trigger. These guys were obviously big fans. Is it on the same level as Chrono Trigger? I don't think so, but it doesn't have to be. Very few games can measure up to what Chrono Trigger is for a lot of people. But what this is I think it's a really enjoyable game. There's a few problems. I think there's a few bugs. Nothing game-breaking, but there's some annoying things that I remember happening to me. I finished this a while back, and the encounter rate can be quite maddening. The random battles are a bit on the like every few steps side, but it never gets to where it's like maddening where you don't want to play it anymore. But it definitely could have been toned down a bit. But the battle system closely mimics Chrono Trigger's, which is a good thing because that was an amazing battle system. and I really dug the story in this game. You're playing as a character who can't use magic, filled in a town named Bellanora, which is populated with everybody can use magic. Everybody. So you're the odd man out right away. You're adopted. That's another strike against you. And then in the history of this town, there was a great war that took place, and one of the main bad guys was also somebody that couldn't use magic. So aside from those two characters, everybody else could use magic, and you're an outcast. And the story that unfolds from there, I think, is pretty interesting. It's above average, and I think this game is pretty damn good. I was excited for this, and I was waiting for it to come out, and there was some problems with the development, and it got delayed a bit, but Black Sigil is a game that I think that deserves a spot in your DS collection. It definitely is underrated. I don't think people give it enough love. Stick through this one. It really is an enjoyable RPG. Solotorobo is another one of my favorite action RPGs on the DS. Quality through and through. One of the most visually impressive looking games on the DS, that's for sure. This one I really didn't have on my radar as well. It was kind of one of those ones I saw at the last minute and read some previews, and I thought it looked amazing. And I enjoyed the game so much that I'm currently trying to go back and track down one of the few PS1 action RPGs I don't have, which is Tail Concerto, which is just like a spiritual successor to. Playing as Red, he's a bounty hunter, he's a dog, which I wasn't too sure how I felt about playing as like a dog, humanoid kind of character, but that's quickly tossed aside. You are in fact a dog, and you can ride in this badass robot suit that you have, and that's the real highlight for me, is this robot suit you're able to, that's where all your combat takes place, and you can kind of grab enemies and smash them onto the ground and jump up in the air and throw them, and then you bounce them off other enemies and then jump back in the air and grab them in the air and continue this combo. And it's skillfully done, and it's fun to master, and I had a lot of fun going from town to town in your airship, and you could fly and flying sections in your plane. Production value, like I said, is through the roof. A very bright, colorful, light-hearted, but yet very interesting story. I had a lot of fun with this game, so much so, and this is getting pretty expensive now, this little box set here, sadly, so definitely try to find a copy if you can. I really want to go back and check out Tail Concerto. That's how much I like this game. A great action RPG in the DS, and definitely worth tracking down if you can find a copy. Shin Megami Tensei Strange Journey. Now I know this is a long-running series, and I gotta say, I'm a fan of the SMT games, I really am, but to be honest, the one that really sticks out to me and one I like the best out of all is still Strange Journey on the DS. Probably due to where the game takes place, the story and the setting. I'm really a big fan of games set in like frozen wastelands and the subarctic temperatures and snow. I love the kind of vibe that gives off, and this one has that in spades. It's called, I think, the Schwarzwald. It's like a mysterious area around the South Pole, kind of like, think Bermuda Triangle, where like shit disappears and things that happen like that aren't explained. That's kind of what the Schwarzwald is, taking place in the South Pole. So you're down at this area of land where nobody wants to be, and there's strange happenings going on, and you're part of this team, and you get sent in, and from what happens there is just a really cool story that unfolds. Very adult, there's a lot of violence, and I really enjoyed the gameplay mechanics in this, which are the same for all SMT games, but it's just such a system that is so enjoyable, and it works. Being able to take place in these first-person dungeon crawling battles where you meet demons and you're able to kind of strike up conversation with these demons and try to kind of persuade them to join your party, and some of them refuse, and some of them get some hilarious banter going back and forth with you, and some of them you get to join you, and then you can amass some of these badass demons to help you fight, and then you can combine these demons to form more powerful demons by combining two of different kinds. And man, the story in this and your crew and the setting and the gameplay all come together to form a really memorable game for me. SMT games are loved by many, and this is one of the best entries in the series in my opinion. A very ambitious game on the DS, and one that is done extremely well. Next up we have Contact, and this is a very odd, quirky action RPG that normally, on paper, when I read about this, I wasn't sure that it'd be my kind of game. In this game you use stickers for combat, you use different outfits and outfit changing to kind of give the character different abilities, and the combat takes place by approaching an enemy, pushing a button, and entering the kind of an auto combat where you have no control over the attacks. Normally those things would be enough to just completely turn me away from a game in question. However, this is done by Suda51 and Grasshopper, and they make some of the most wonderfully creative, very unique games. And it's kind of hit or miss with Suda51. Some of the games I love, like Shadows of the Damned, Killer is Dead, and then there's others like Flower, Sun, and Rain, which I just could not get into for the life of me. But Contact is a very interesting game that uses the DS in very unique and creative ways. Using the two screens to full effect, there's a professor who has crash landed on a planet, and he's like scattered his fuel cells or power cells, and he needs help to get them back to power up a ship to leave this planet. And it breaks the fourth wall in many interesting ways. The professor has contacted you, which is like me, the actual player holding the DS, has contacted you and is trying to get you to help him to control this boy Terry, who takes place in the bottom screen, collect these power cells for him and find these items he needs to power up a ship to leave. And Terry has no idea that we are there, you and I, playing the game, but the professor is the only one that knows we're there and talks to us, and the dialogue that takes place between the professor and yourself and then controlling Terry is all done masterfully. They have really struck gold in the way that the interactions between yourself as the player, the professor, and then Terry on the bottom screen. Now the professor is in the top screen, and it's all like 8-bit retro style, and his dialogue is fantastic. He's got a pet cat there with him. I think his name is Moki. Overall, I just can't really put my finger on what it is about this game that made me keep pushing forward. The story does get very interesting later on. Some of the gameplay choices were questionable in the beginning, but the charming story, the inventive use of the two screens, and just the awesome dialogue and the concept really took me for quite a ride. I really enjoyed Contact. I think it's very unique, and I think it's definitely a must-own. It's very cheap. If you can find a copy, definitely pick it up. It's nothing like you've ever played. I think it's a job well done. So I hope you guys have enjoyed a look at a few of my favorite RPGs in the system, and I will do a full-blown buyer's guide for the DS here in the coming months. Hope you guys have enjoyed taking a look at my favorites. Before I leave you, I just want to give you a couple honorable mentions that will definitely be expanded upon in the next buyer's guide for the DS. First of all is Golden Sun. This is a conclusion to the two original Golden Suns on the Game Boy Advance, some of my favorite RPGs on that system. This is a great continuation of that franchise. Top-notch production value on the DS. This is a monster of a game, and it kind of chronicles everything that happened in the first two games very well. Nostalgia is just that, a nice trip down memory lane of what you remember RPGs to be in the 16-bit era and early 32-bit. It's very lighthearted, but it's got a good story, the mechanics are sound, it's got a great setting and theme, and I really enjoyed the gameplay of this. Standard, traditional through and through, but definitely a great time. Fighting Fantasy. Now, I gotta give special mention to this. This is a pretty stunning RPG, and opinions on this are kind of mixed. I've seen critics bash it, and I've seen players love it. For me, I fall in definitely the love it side. I think it's a very ambitious RPG. It follows like an old, I believe, book, or a series of books, if I'm not mistaken, where it's kind of like a choose-your-own adventure. There isn't too much of the choosing your own adventure sections in this. In the beginning, they kind of ask you a series of questions. Then you're kind of out into the land. And it kind of reminded me of like an Oblivion game on the DS. It's amazing what they fit onto the cart once again. I thought the graphics were pretty stunning. The combat was pretty good, all first person. The enemies were very nicely detailed. The world was great. If you're into first person RPGs, and there's a few of them that are pretty good on the DS that I'll go into further on in the buyer's guide, definitely check out Fighting Fantasy. I really enjoyed this one. Sands of Destruction I thought was an excellent RPG. Now this is done by some of the biggest names in RPGs. I think guys that worked on the Final Fantasy games and another guy that did the soundtrack for another pretty big game. So there's a lot of expectations on this one, and I think it got pretty average to above average reviews. Some people loved it, some people hated it. Some great dual screen bosses, a really cool story, and this is quite a lengthy adventure. I'm really looking forward to talking about this one more in the future. And I want to toss out Rondo of Swords. This is a strategy RPG, but it does something a little different. Instead of just using a grid where you move in squares and attack, this game you kind of plan your route. So you're going to draw a line with the stylus route, and you're going to hit your attack button, and your character's going to take off and just kind of weave through enemies that you drew, the path that you drew, and just hack and slash while he's going on the way. A really cool battle system that tries something different. Would I want this system to replace all strategy RPGs in the future? Probably not, but for what it does, I really enjoyed its different take on the strategy RPG genre. Thank you guys once again for tuning into Games of War. Thank you so much for the support on Patreon. This is the increase. Games of War is now moving forward, full steam ahead. Look for another video in the next couple of days. I've got a couple of great ideas. I want to do a happy birthday to the Vita and talk about its current state, because it's been 5 years, believe it or not. 5 years of the Vita. How does Sony reward its birthday? By canceling PlayStation Now on the system. So, go figure. Sony's been the Vita's biggest enemy its entire life, so I wouldn't expect anything less. And my next video coming up here after that is a full-blown original Xbox buyer's guide. I bought the system on launch. It was my main system of that generation, so I stuck with it from the very beginning to the very end. And there's a lot of great games that I think a lot of people don't know about. A lot of people think that Xbox only has Halo, and that couldn't be further from the truth. It's an amazing console, and I can't wait to share a buyer's guide with all of you. Thank you guys once again. You're the best audience in the world. Games of War really is nothing without you.